After a terrible almost 9 months of being unemployed during the pandemic, I have finally found a job and I want to help you find one too. First of all, hi, if you've never seen my face before, I'm Maya, and if you're a returning subscriber, that's literally so nice and you deserve the world. Today, I am going to be talking about all of my tips and tricks of how I found a job in the middle of this pandemic and how you can hopefully implement those in your job search and find one as well. Just to start off, a little bit about me and my job search. I graduated college in May of 2019, immediately moved to New York City and started an internship, and then 3 months later that internship turned into a full-time position. Then in March, obviously the pandemic hit. My entire company was furloughed, and then most of our company was then laid off about a month and a half to 2 months later. So I've been searching for jobs since March, and I officially got a new position right at the end of the year, like right before the new year hit. So I have now started in that role, and it's going really well, and I can hopefully help you figure out how I got that role and how you can find one as well. Like I usually do in these types of like sit down advice videos, I have a Google Doc sitting over here, so I'm going to be referencing that a lot. And I'm just going to go over like my step-by-step process. I don't know if it's like steps or number of tips, but you'll get the gist. If you like this style of video, please give it a thumbs up. You could also subscribe. It would really help me out, and I answer like almost every single comment. So if you have a question about anything that I talk about in this video, please leave it in the comments below and I will make sure to get back to you. Step number one is making sure you have your resume right. Obviously, this is super basic. Everybody talks about this, but it's the most important step because it's what gets your foot in the door. You want to make sure it is clean and concise, but also eye-catching. You want to make sure it's all on one page if you can, and you want to make sure all of your most relevant experience is at the top. If you're just starting out in your career, you probably don't have that much job experience, but you want to emphasize the most important and impressive job experience that you do have versus just getting as many jobs on there as possible. You don't want to include anything from high school, only include things from college if it's relevant to the job that you're applying for. You also want to make sure that you customize your resume to the job that you're applying for. So during this whole pandemic, I'm sure a lot of people are looking for lots of different types of jobs. And so if you are applying to one type of job, there might be a customer service experience that you have on your resume that is super relevant to that job, but not exactly relevant to another type of job that you might apply for. You want to kind of tailor everything to the company that you're applying for and make sure it is the best version of yourself that you can put forward. Resumes can be really tricky, and once you've been like staring at it too long, it can be kind of hard to judge your own resume. So I recommend having someone you trust and respect take a look at it. I know it can be a very vulnerable thing to do, but it's super helpful, and make sure that it's somebody that's going to give you their honest opinion and feedback. And you want to have multiple people look at it because a lot of people have different preferences that they might like on a resume that someone else might not like. You just kind of want to get a broad range of opinions on that. Step number two is your cover letter. This is kind of similar as far as advice goes to your resume. I would have someone you trust and respect take a look at it. And what I do is I keep my cover letter in a Google Doc, and I essentially leave like blank spaces in the part where I would name the company or name who I'm addressing it to, and essentially use it as like a skeleton or a draft. And then when I'm going to apply for a job, I customize that cover letter to that position. So you would fill in the blanks of the company that you're applying for and the specific part about why you think you would be a good fit to that company. You don't want to make it too broad because the person that is reading this cover letter obviously wants to be able to picture you specifically in that role, not just why you're a good candidate for a job in general. I know cover letters can seem really tedious, and there's a lot of people out there that say a lot of companies don't even read them, and that is true. But back in college, I had a friend tell me about how the company that she worked for, if you applied for a job there and didn't fill out the cover letter section of the application, they would disqualify you from the position. They didn't actually read the cover letters, but if you didn't take the time and effort to fill that part out, they didn't look at you as a good candidate. So I don't know if that's true for any other companies. I'm sure it is, and I'm sure for some it's not, but that's just really stuck with me, and I always make sure to fill out the cover letter just in case. Step number 3 is the thing that helped me the absolute most during my job search, and it's another Google Doc. So I kept a master Google Doc that I literally titled Job Search, and it essentially had all of my job search information, and I could use it every single day to check back on where I was with different job applications or companies that I was interested in, or just the entire process overall. So I'll put like a screen grab of mine up here, that way you can see what it looked like, use it as an example if you're into this type of thing. I'm super type A and organized like that, so this was super helpful for me, and hopefully it will help some of you as well. So what I kept on here was message samples and skeletons of things that I would message people if I was reaching out to them, as far as like if I was interested in their company, or if it was a friend, to see if like they had any knowledge of any like jobs that were available. I'll go over that a little bit more later, but just know that that's something that I kept on here. Something else I kept on this Google Doc was a list of companies that I would be interested in. So sometimes randomly throughout the day, I would like see an ad for like a product or something and think like, oh, that would be a good company to look into to see if they have any available positions. And I would just add it to this list. That way I could go back later and I wouldn't forget about the company. It's also good to, if you check like a website and look at their current job listings and they don't have anything available, you can know that you checked on that certain day, and then like 3 weeks later go back and check again to see if they have anything new that opened up. I also kept a master list on here of every single job application that I had filled out or position that I had seen open, and go over what step of the process of the like application process that I was in for that specific position. So for example, I just pulled up a job that I see is available, and I'll use it as an example. So there's a marketing coordinator role available at Revlon. So if I had seen that that job was available, I would put it down on this list, right? Revlon marketing coordinator. And then I would first write that I filled out the application and submitted it on their website or on LinkedIn, depending on where the application was. Check that off. Then I would find somebody in the company that I could message on LinkedIn and send them one of those skeleton message samples that I had before. And so I would tailor that to that specific person and message that person about the company. Then I would mark off that I either still needed to do that or did already complete doing that, and that would be that step. Then if I heard back about the position, then I would mark that off. I could write something like heard back from Nancy that works in HR at Revlon, and we are setting up a call on Tuesday. So then I would know, okay, I have already talked to somebody, getting my foot in the door, haven't heard back about the specific application, but I can talk to this woman from the company. And then I would just keep going from there. If you had an interview, then you would mark that off. But just that way, if you're applying to so many positions at one time, you don't like get confused about who you're talking to, from what company, or what step in the process you're from, like on in each role. Or if you fill out an application for a position and you forget that you applied to that specific position, you can see it on this list and remind yourself, oh yeah, I still have to message someone on LinkedIn about that position. I recommend messaging somebody about any position that you apply for, even if it feels like a long shot. The actual like application process for a lot of companies is just a formality. HR will get thousands of applications per role, and a lot of the time that's why they just end up hiring from either people they already know, like within the company, or off of references. So I definitely recommend just getting your name out there and trying to find connections within the company, because most of the time just being a name on their application portal isn't actually going to get you an interview. Speaking of interviews, I keep a section on this Google Doc for that as well. So anytime that you do have an interview, say you end up getting an interview for this marketing coordinator role at Revlon, I would list out any potential questions that I think they may ask me. So this could be, tell me about yourself, what are your strengths and weaknesses, like all of those basic questions, but then also more specific questions that you think they might ask you, like tell me about a conflict that you had in your last role and how you solved it, things like that. And I would specifically like type out any, like what my answer would be to that question and use it to essentially like mock interview myself and prepare for the interview. Then after the interview, I would go back and try to remember all of the questions that the person actually did ask me. And if I didn't already have those listed on my Google Doc, I would write those down and say what I answered or what I would answer next time I was asked that question. This is really helpful because interviews can be really scary, and I could make a whole separate video on interviews. If you wanted to see that, let me know in the comments. I feel like there's a lot of good resources out there, but obviously the interview is the most intimidating part of this process. So I know it can be super scary, and I just like to be as prepared as possible. And especially there's a lot of interview questions that you'll get asked that are kind of like curveballs, and you're like, oh, I would have never thought of that, which is why I didn't have an answer prepared for it. So the more you prepare and the more that you list out those curveball questions, the more prepared you will be, the more confident you'll feel going into the interview, and the better you will do. Speaking of resources for interviews, LinkedIn has a whole page of interview question and answers, like examples and things that like you should be using in your answers to specific questions. I found it super helpful and would definitely recommend, which brings me into step number 4, which is signing up for LinkedIn Premium. LinkedIn Premium is how I found all of my job postings. You can go to specific companies' pages and go to their career section and see what positions they have open, but LinkedIn is just a more concise way of looking at all of the different jobs at one time, and it's super helpful because you can set up job alerts, you can save any job that you're interested in and then go back to it later. You can fill out actual applications on LinkedIn, and then you can go into the job and see who actually posted it from that company. You could message that exact person. You can search for people that work at that company on LinkedIn and then message them. There's so many different ways that you can interact with a company on LinkedIn. I personally think it's the best way to get noticed and would definitely recommend. I believe LinkedIn Premium is about $30 a month, but super worth it if you're very serious about finding a job. Step number 5 is reaching out to people for help, essentially. So I talked about this before with the skeleton of a message that you might send to somebody, but I'm talking about messaging literally anyone that you might know. And this part is really vulnerable and scary, and it can feel like you're being a burden, but especially right now, obviously there are so many people looking for jobs, and everybody knows somebody that's currently looking for a job. It is not abnormal to reach out to somebody and say, hey, I know you work at this company. If you find out about any potential jobs opening up, can you please let me know? There's so many different ways to say it depending on how comfortable you are with that specific person, or if you don't know them at all. There's a million different examples of messages that you can send. So there's this one specific article from Cultivated Culture, and it's titled something like How to Get a Job with No Connections. My friend Joey sent it to me, and it was one of the most helpful job search resources that I have ever seen. I'm gonna link the article below, but in this, the guy from Cultivated Culture goes over a bunch of different tips of how to find a connection in a company that you don't actually know anybody in. The article gives a couple different examples of how to go about reaching out to somebody depending on their like level within the company, or if you actually know them. So that's definitely super helpful, and it goes over going about the message in a way where you're more interested in learning about them as a person and their actual experience versus saying, hey, there's this job, can you help me get it? Basically, people love talking about themselves more than they like helping other people, really. So if you go about it in a way where you're just trying to look at them as a mentor, essentially, they're going to be so much more inclined to actually help you get a position at that company. Step number 6 is to be open-minded. I know most of us have an idea in our heads of what our ideal job would be in our ideal city, but these are unprecedented times, and it is worth taking a step back and really opening your mind about what potential jobs you could be interested in. Get creative as far as jobs that you could see yourself doing and really examine all of your options. If this job market isn't leading you to your dream job, then take a look at other things that you could potentially be interested in and jobs that you might stay in for like a year or two, and look at it as a resume builder. You really never know. You may end up in a company or in a position that you absolutely love, or you could meet people through this job that impact your life in a way that you could have never imagined. Not only should you stay open-minded about the types of jobs that you look at, but also the places in which those jobs are in. You could look at this as a chance to get outside of your comfort zone and go somewhere where you wouldn't have normally gone. Unfortunately, this is not a time where we can be super picky about the types of jobs that we apply to or are interested in. There are limited jobs out there, and if you really are serious about finding a job, you need to broaden your horizons and look for things that might not have been top of mind, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be bad jobs. Obviously, don't apply to anything that you know you're going to hate, because that's just a recipe for disaster, but just be more open-minded about things that your experience could qualify you for or that would be helpful for your career path. The last step is probably beating a dead horse, but be patient. Trust me, I know firsthand how frustrating this job hunt can be. Like I said, I was searching for 9 months before I found something, but throughout that 9 months, I had a ton of interviews. I had a couple different job offers that I actually declined because I knew that they just weren't right for me. So like I said, although you can't be super picky right now, trust your gut in that decision making of what kind of job would be the right next step for you. I promise eventually something that is the right fit will come along and your hard work will pay off. I believe in you. You got this. There were a bunch of times throughout this whole process that I had plenty of mental breakdowns and thought that I was never going to find a job again. I started researching grad school because that's just what you do when you're in your 20s and you can't find a job. You go to grad school instead. And I ended up finding something that I am really loving so far. So I hope that this video was helpful. If you have any questions about anything I said, like I said, please leave them in the comments below. Definitely check out the description bar. I'm going to leave a ton of resources like that Cultivated Culture article that I mentioned, the LinkedIn interview page that I mentioned, and anything else that I can find that I think would be helpful for you. So I wish you the best of luck with your job search, and I will hopefully see you in the next video. Bye.